can really pick up the relief there, you see, Giles? And from that basis, you can draw the actual stratigraphy.
For centuries, Angkor Wat has stood as a masterpiece of devotion and power, its towers rising above the Cambodian jungle. Every wall, every carving, every moat has been studied, or so we thought.
Angkor Wat was built in order to worship the gods. And some have suggested that Angkor Wat may be a representation of Indra's heaven itself.
But new scans have revealed something sealed beneath the temple itself. A hidden vault untouched for nearly 900 years.
Even a small road from 1,000 years ago, even if it's completely overgrown, you can still see the trace of that road.
What was inside was not treasure, and it was not empty. It was something far darker, something that forces us to see Angkor Wat in a way no one ever imagined. Angkor Wat, the city that should not exist. In the 12th century, at the height of the Khmer Empire, builders in Cambodia created something that still defies belief. The Khmer were the dominant power in Southeast Asia, ruling over vast lands that stretched across present-day Cambodia. They raised Angkor Wat, a temple city so immense it rivaled the great capitals of the world. It was the centerpiece of a metropolis that may have housed hundreds of thousands of people. For its time, such an achievement was almost unthinkable. Most medieval societies struggled with food shortages, poor infrastructure, and limited manpower. Yet here, in the middle of one of the harshest tropical landscapes on Earth, the Khmer carved out a project so ambitious, it seemed to defy the limits of its age. The design was no accident. The temple's towers were shaped to represent Mount Meru, the sacred mountain believed to be the home of the gods. Its courtyards and passages were laid out as layers of the universe, with the tallest sanctuary symbolizing heaven itself. Angkor Wat was not just a building. It was a statement of cosmic order in stone, a place where every staircase and doorway reminded people that the king stood at the very center of both earthly rule and divine power. Huge water channels surrounded Angkor Wat, some so wide they looked like rivers. They made the temple appear as if it was floating on a great lake. For worshippers, the water was not just useful. It represented the cosmic ocean that separated humans from the gods. For the builders, it showed their skill and control. The channels were dug and leveled so precisely that they survived centuries of floods and droughts. Temple and water together formed a single design, a map of the universe with the king at its center. Inside, the walls told stories on a grand scale. Thousands of celestial dancers, gods, demons, and mythical beasts were carved into the sandstone. Long panels ran across the temple, filled with scenes of great battles and legendary tales from Hindu scripture. The sheer number of figures was staggering. Each carving was a declaration that the Khmer Empire was not just powerful, but eternal. How such precision was possible with the simple tools of the 12th century remains a mystery. The achievement becomes even more striking when the setting is considered. Angkor was built in a jungle plagued by heat, floods, and disease. Yet the Khmer adapted, creating one of the most advanced water systems in history. They dug canals, built reservoirs, and diverted rivers to keep their fields alive year-round. Without this system, the city could not have lasted a single generation. With it, Angkor became the largest pre-modern city ever built. But even as Angkor impressed the world above ground, rumors told another story. Locals claimed the perfection was too great to be the work of human hands. Some said divine forces helped raise the towers. Others spoke of hidden vaults built during construction, chambers said to hold things too dangerous for the living. No evidence ever confirmed these stories, yet they survived across generations. What made them unsettling was the suggestion that one day such vaults might be uncovered, and that what lay inside could alter how history remembers Angkor Wat. And those rumors would one day be enough to draw explorers back into the jungle, determined to uncover what Angkor had tried so carefully to hide. The jungle's first witness. In 1860, French naturalist Henri Mouhot ventured into the jungles of Cambodia. He was not searching for lost civilizations. His mission was to collect plants, insects, and rare animals. But the jungle he entered was merciless. The air was thick and wet, the ground turned to sucking mud, and every step forward seemed to bring a new obstacle. Leeches clung to his legs, insects swarmed in clouds, and the oppressive heat slowed his progress to a crawl. Many naturalists of his time would have abandoned the journey, but Mouhot pressed on, determined to push deeper. After days of struggle, the endless jungle suddenly gave way to stone. Rising above the canopy were massive spires, their surfaces covered with carvings of gods and demons. Mouhot pushed forward, cutting through the vines that had nearly swallowed the walls. There, half hidden by the forest, stood Angkor Wat. For a man who had only read of Europe's great cathedrals and ruins, the sight was almost unbelievable. He recorded in his journal that this temple complex surpassed the wonders of Greece and Rome. His words shocked readers back home, who struggled to imagine such grandeur hidden in Asia's forests. But as he examined the ruins more closely, he began to notice details that troubled him. Some passages had collapsed in ways that did not look natural. Certain stone walls appeared to have been deliberately sealed. Corridors stretched out only to end suddenly in blank walls. It was as if parts of the structure had been hidden on purpose. In his notes, Mouhot wrote not only of awe, but of unease. He described the atmosphere of Angkor Wat as if it was guarded, as though the temple itself did not want to be disturbed. In his journals, Mouhot admitted he felt uneasy. He described Angkor Wat as majestic, but also strangely guarded, as if it was protecting something that outsiders were not meant to see. He could only speculate. These observations sparked questions that would not go away. Did the builders abandon it in haste, or were they sealing something inside its walls? He left Cambodia without answers, but his sketches and reports reignited Europe's fascination with ancient ruins. His discoveries brought Angkor Wat to the world's attention again, yet they also raised new questions. Mouhot's notes about blocked corridors and sealed spaces suggested that the temple's grandeur was only the surface. Something more, something hidden, seemed to lie beneath the stones. And those who followed him into the jungle would soon report the same unsettling signs. Whispers of the forbidden depths. For many years, villagers who lived near Angkor Wat noticed odd things about the ground around the temple. According to reports, farmers working the rice fields near the outer rings of water said their tools sometimes struck the soil and produced hollow sounds. In certain spots, even footsteps gave off a faint echo, as if there were spaces beneath the earth. Some villagers believed these were old storage chambers built by the temple's creators. Others said they were hidden passageways. A few warned their children never to work those plots, claiming the ground was unstable and should be avoided. Monks in nearby monasteries added their own warnings. They spoke of places within the temple grounds that felt uneasy, what they called restless areas. Visitors were advised not to linger there. The monks explained that disturbing these spots could bring misfortune. Outsiders often brushed this off as superstition, but the warnings were repeated often enough that they became local taboos. French colonial surveyors in the late 19th and early 20th centuries recorded their own unusual findings. Some of their early maps marked uneven ground near the temple's western approach and noted depressions that looked like collapsed tunnels. A few reports even suggested that certain walls hid blocked doorways. Yet, according to later accounts, not all of these sketches appeared in the official records. Some historians believe this was the result of poor storage or wartime loss, but others think the omissions may have been deliberate. Stories of accidents gave these suspicions more weight. Laborers digging near the Western Causeway were said to fall sick without explanation. Others claimed tools broke too easily, as if the stone resisted their work. Lanterns and lamps were reported to flicker or die out near certain walls, even when the air outside was calm. These incidents became part of local folklore, told with a mixture of caution and fear. Explorers added their own unsettling accounts. A few spoke of stumbling on sealed doorways carved with Naga serpents. In Cambodian tradition, the Naga are guardians of the underworld and protectors of sacred waters. To find their image at a blocked entrance suggested that these were not ordinary doors, but thresholds that were meant to stay closed. Locals also passed down stories of curses. According to them, anyone who forced open the sealed places risked punishment. The stories warned of ruined harvests, sudden floods, or outbreaks of disease that would follow such violations. Outsiders dismissed these as legends, but the tales endured, repeated from one generation to the next. For decades, scholars saw these accounts as nothing more than rumor. Yet when modern technology finally began to scan the ground below Angkor, the old warnings no longer sounded like simple ghost stories. The sky that stripped the jungle bare. By the 1990s, archaeologists already knew Angkor Wat was enormous, but their view was limited to what could be mapped on foot. Dense jungle and centuries of soil made it impossible to see the whole picture. That changed when researchers used LIDAR, a technology mounted on aircraft that fired rapid laser pulses down through the trees. By measuring the time it took for the light to bounce back, scientists could strip away vegetation in digital images and reveal the bare ground underneath. The results stunned everyone. Suddenly, the jungle floor lit up with the outlines of a hidden metropolis. Roads stretched in straight lines for kilometers. Water channels formed a complex grid that showed careful planning. Vast reservoirs appeared, each more than a kilometer long, large enough to supply water for entire districts of the city. Around the central temple, dozens of previously unknown settlements, smaller shrines, and connected complexes emerged from obscurity. The discovery changed how Angkor was seen overnight. It was no longer just a single grand temple. It was the capital of one of the world's largest pre-modern cities, covering an area bigger than modern Paris. According to reports, the findings forced archaeologists to rethink their earlier assumptions. The Khmer Empire had not only built a temple for worship, but had designed a massive urban center with extraordinary organization and scale. Yet amid all this, LiDAR revealed something far stranger. In the scans directly beneath Angkor Wat itself, researchers found geometric shapes that should not have been there. These were rectangular cavities, aligned precisely with the temple's foundations. They were too regular to be natural features. Their symmetry suggested deliberate construction, and their position under the most sacred parts of the site raised difficult questions. Archaeologists debated their meaning. Some suggested they were foundation deposits, ritual spaces that sometimes contained offerings meant to bless a structure. But others doubted this explanation. Typical foundation deposits were small pits holding symbolic items. The voids detected beneath Angkor Wat appeared much larger, too large to dismiss as ceremonial containers. A few researchers speculated they might be sealed chambers created for reasons that remain unclear. What unsettled many was not only their existence, but the fact that they had remained hidden for centuries. They came into view only when modern technology looked down from the sky and stripped away the jungle's cover. What the sky revealed raised questions that only the ground itself could answer. The next step would be to probe the temple directly, using radar to see what secrets the stone was keeping. Signals from the underground. The scans were focused on two critical areas: the Western Causeway, which served as the main entrance to the temple, and the Central Sanctuary, the holiest space in the complex. The goal was to see if the anomalies were natural formations or something deliberately constructed. The radar images stunned the team. Instead of solid earth, the scans showed hollow spaces that stretched beneath the temple. Some appeared to be narrow corridors, while others looked like large, sealed chambers. What surprised the researchers most was the way the voids were reinforced. According to reports, the radar suggested that the underground structures were built with denser layers of stone than the buildings above them, as if the builders wanted these spaces to survive at all costs. The size of these cavities was also unusual. Ordinary ritual caches or foundation deposits were typically small and shallow, just large enough to hold symbolic items. These voids were far different. Some extended like underground halls, long and wide enough to hold dozens of people. Their scale and their secrecy suggested a purpose that went beyond ritual offerings. On the ground, the work was not without problems. Excavation teams reported unexpected collapses when digging near certain sections, even when the stone above looked stable. Some of the radar equipment failed without clear cause, forcing delays. According to workers, faint carvings resembling warning symbols were found near blocked passages. Whether these marks were intentional or simply worn decorations was unclear, but they added to the unease. Several local laborers refused to continue. They claimed the sealed chambers were cursed, older than even the Khmer Empire itself. Rumors spread that anyone who tried to break into the spaces would suffer consequences. While archaeologists dismissed these fears as superstition, the tension on site was undeniable. Still, the scientific teams pressed forward. Curiosity outweighed fear. The scale of the underground structures and the lengths taken to hide them suggested that something important had been concealed for centuries. Whatever it was, they were determined to uncover it. After weeks of scanning and cautious digging, the outlines of a hidden corridor finally came into focus. At last, an entrance was identified, and what lay beyond it would prove unlike anything the archaeologists had ever seen. The descent into the vault. The entrance was hidden beneath a tangle of thick roots and collapsed stone, almost as if the jungle itself had been trying to keep it buried. Clearing it was slow and dangerous. Every slab had to be removed carefully, because the weight of centuries pressed against the blocked passage. According to reports, the workers who pried away the last stones stepped back in silence. Behind them was a narrow opening that sloped downward into complete darkness. The first steps inside were cautious. The corridor was tight, forcing the team to move in single file. The walls showed clear signs of being sealed by hand long ago. Hardened mortar filled the seams, and parts of the stone surface bore marks of tools used centuries earlier. This was no natural fissure. It was a passage deliberately built and deliberately hidden. The air was immediately oppressive. Several archaeologists later described it as foul and heavy, the kind of stale air that had not been touched for hundreds of years. Some of them admitted to feeling a strong sense of dread they could not explain. Others reported lightheadedness, as if the very atmosphere resisted their presence. Protective masks were handed out, but even with them, the feeling of unease only deepened. torches and floodlights revealed details that made the team even more uneasy. The soot-stained walls were carved with images of Naga serpents devouring human figures. In Cambodian tradition, Naga are guardians, but here the carvings suggested something more ominous. According to some researchers, they could symbolize sacrifice or punishment. One archaeologist remarked that it felt less like a protective image and more like a warning carved into stone. The deeper the team moved, the more intense the atmosphere became. The silence pressed down on them, broken only by the scrape of boots on stone and the faint clink of equipment. The corridor twisted and then dropped more steeply, as though it was designed to pull its visitors away from the world above. Several workers later admitted they considered turning back, but the pressure to continue the exploration was overwhelming. Finally, at the end of the sloping passage, the team came to a massive stone door. It was unlike anything they had seen in the rest of the temple. The seams were packed tightly with hardened mortar that looked as if it had been designed to last forever. The door had no visible handle or hinges, only faint markings on its surface. According to reports, some workers thought they resembled protective sigils, but others believed they were curses placed to keep intruders out. It took hours of chiseling and drilling to break the seal. When the door at last shifted, a rush of stale air poured out, carrying with it the weight of centuries. The chamber swallowed the team in a silence so deep it felt unnatural, as though sound itself was reluctant to enter. The archaeologists had opened what had been hidden for nearly 900 years. Inside, the truth of Angkor Wat revealed itself. The Vault of Blood. What the archaeologists uncovered inside was not an empty chamber or a hidden treasure. The floor was covered with bones. According to reports, dozens, perhaps even hundreds, of skeletal remains were arranged in deliberate patterns around a central stone altar. Some appeared in rough circles, others with their heads all facing inward, as if to mark the altar itself as the focus of their deaths. The arrangement did not resemble burials of honor. It looked like the aftermath of ritual killing. Several skeletons were found with wrists and ankles bound. Others bore fractured skulls and deep cuts across ribs and spines. Specialists who later examined the remains suggested these were signs of execution. These people had not died by accident or disease. They had been restrained, killed, and placed in a manner that suggested sacrifice. On the altar stood several bronze vessels. At first, they looked ordinary, tarnished by time, but residue clung stubbornly inside. Samples were collected, sealed, and reportedly sent for laboratory testing. Early results, according to accounts shared later, pointed to dried blood. What unsettled researchers most was that the residue contained both animal and human traces, apparently mixed together. Some experts speculated these vessels were used in sacrificial rites to sanctify the very foundations of Angkor Wat. The walls of the chamber deepened the unease. Though faded, inscriptions in Sanskrit and ancient Khmer were still visible. They were not decorative texts, but warnings. One repeated phrase read, "The blood beneath sustains the gods. Break this chamber, and their hunger will return." Scholars noted that such writing may not have been meant for outsiders, but as reminders for temple priests and workers to never disturb the sealed space. To those who stood in the chamber, however, it felt like a curse aimed directly at them. The atmosphere quickly became overwhelming. Several archaeologists reportedly wept at the sight of the bones. Others refused to remain in the room for long, convinced the space carried a presence that resisted intrusion. Workers muttered that this was the curse locals had warned of for generations. Tension spread among the team. Some urged secrecy, arguing that the find was too dangerous to reveal. Others insisted it had to be documented, no matter how disturbing. The implications were extraordinary. For centuries, Angkor Wat had been celebrated as the pinnacle of architecture and devotion. Tourists and scholars saw it as a monument to gods and empire. But this chamber suggested something far darker. If these bones were truly the remains of sacrificial victims, then Angkor Wat was not only a temple, it was a monument built on blood. The discovery left historians with urgent questions. Were these killings a single event tied to the temple's consecration, or were they repeated rites carried out to preserve the king's power? Did the Khmer rulers believe that their empire could only survive through human sacrifice? No clear answers exist, but the evidence suggested the temple's glory was inseparable from violence. And with this, the history of the Khmer Empire was forced into a darker light. Angkor Wat could no longer be seen only as a symbol of devotion. Beneath the carvings and stone, blood was its true foundation.